to another episode of Gov Tech Today. I'm Russell Lowery.
And I'm Jen Saha.
And together we try and bridge the gap between .com and .gov. Speaking of bridging the gap, the California Department of Technology has released a new vision, or I should say Envision, for the state's technology infrastructure. They emphasize innovative, resilient, and equitable IT infrastructure. Maybe to kick us off as we begin our dive on this is what does this mean for the vendor community when the state reveals this new roadmap?
So it's a huge tool that is gifted to the vendor community when you're selling to the public sector. Like, just imagine, like, in a B2B scenario, you don't really have insights into what, corporation XYZ's strategy is or what they're aiming towards. I mean, that's all in closed door board meetings, and you're just kind of guessing. In the public sector, it's all public, which is one of the benefits. The transparency that comes along with selling to government is something that if you're a smart vendor, you're going to take advantage of and comb through it, live it, breathe it, own it, parrot the language back to your customers and your clients, point to it when you're in a meeting with them and say, look, this is your plan. We're here to help you achieve these goals.
How do your goods and services help them achieve their highest stated priorities, as at least outlined in the document?
Yep. And I mean, they put them right out there for you. They have 5 key goals in this Envision 2026 plan that everything they do are going to be working towards achieving.
Well, and a lot of our audience are state employees. They have the .gov email address. And before we dive into the 5 individual points, why does this matter if I'm a person in the technology space and I'm an employee and leadership on high has announced these things? Does it matter in my day-to-day life as a state employee?
It should trickle down, right? So whatever you're working on as an analyst in a random department should somehow fold into the state's overall IT strategy. So I think it's validation for a lot of those employees, like what you're doing, what you're working on, what you're trying to achieve in your individual role does fold up into the state's overarching set of goals.
Okay, so your ambitious state employee that's maybe looking to promote or interview for a job or prepare for a leadership level appointment might review the document and talk about how their work is advancing the state's overall goals. Might be one particular tool or use for it.
I mean, employers love it when you do your homework and going into an interview and saying, I've reviewed Envision 2026. I've reviewed our department's plans. I'm understanding how all of these pieces fit together. An excellent interview question might even be, how does this role contribute to these overarching goals? How do you envision this role participating in Envision 2026?
Well, I listened to a speech at one of the events with Ms. Bailey Cremens, and she knew this work product intimately. I noted that she was giving this speech and it had the 3 pillars and the 5 points, and she was speaking extemporaneously, I presume it was a prepared remarks, but she knew the material intimately and cold, which prompted me to want to dig in and think about it, go back and read it, because if state leadership was investing this amount of time in owning the material, then if I'm going to have occasion to speak with them, I need to own it as well. I'm not sure I own it, but I have read it. And why don't we just walk through a little bit and talk about each of the 5 points as and how we might begin to think about. The first one was secure California's technology investments by safeguarding public sector technology infrastructure and data.
I mean, a no-brainer, right? Cybersecurity, always a huge focus on any public sector entity, and that holds true for California as well. I mean, we're working at a deficit right now. Like, we watch all the budget change proposals. Right. There are a number of them focused on cybersecurity. So It's somewhere where they do need a big focus and increased focus. And they're doing a number of initiatives to sort of help support this, including like enterprise contracts, maybe building out the CalNet contract vehicle to include some security products, looking at things from an enterprise perspective when it comes to cybersecurity. How can they save money? How can they standardize on a set of tools that works for multiple departments? So I would expect that those are some of the things you would see fold up into that goal.
I was encouraged that cybersecurity was the first plank. I haven't had a conversation to figure out if they rank the planks or
I don't know if they do.
They do, but
I
I noted that it was first, and the state is producing so much data and more every year. You don't if you don't know the number, if you said how much data is the state going to even produce or consume next year, it's more. And the year after that, it's more. And so that the emphasis on securing that data, I think should give Californians comfort.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. Being a CISO, information security officer, is probably the most terrifying job,
Right.
like that exists out there, especially with the introduction of AI and all the new complications that includes.
And I've seen in the private sector, at least, they're holding CISOs accountable,
right? Like personally liable.
Right. Which raises the stress level. Not that it doesn't exist in the public sector, but it's a different level. The second plank that they mentioned was the importance of personnel. Strengthen California's public sector technology workforce for today and tomorrow by creating and retaining skilled and adaptable employees.
Super easy to say, way more difficult to actually accomplish, because there's so much that goes into that. Like, we've both lived through a number of iterations of simplifying the classifications, trying to get people to the right pay scales, eliminating outdated classifications, improving the hiring process, expediting these things. And it all sounds fabulous and great, and it absolutely should be on this list as a priority, but it is a difficult mountain to move.
I've been frustrated as I've dived into this subject from the cybersecurity perspective, thinking about how do you design and train a workforce, and it's not a clear path. It's not like you say, do this thing, here's step 1, step 2, step 3, and you're in. And I think in some of the ways, the definition of that entry level is absurd. People don't know how to get it. Getting state work is hard in and of itself, but then getting particularly how do your skills align for the tech workforce is even harder.
I love this focus for the private sector, honestly, because to your point, just the absolute ridiculous pace that is changing in this industry right now means that hiring and staffing up on the state side should really be able to be focused on getting a nimble workforce that can respond, and then turning to the private sector and your partners in the private sector when it makes sense to do so. I think there's a tremendous opportunity, of course, within Code Section 19130, all union rules and everything. No one's getting replaced. We're not outsourcing work, but we're hiring the holes where we need help. And that's an opportunity, again, for the private sector.
The holes are everywhere, and they seem to be growing. I know that we recently hired a couple of business development reps, and we wanted people with technical skill, and I mean, they're studying for the CCNA, and I knew about it from watching a few YouTube videos or whatever, but watching the coursework and the material and the effort that goes into studying it blows me away that people would consider a CCNA an entry level certification. Are you kidding me? This is you're skilled and talented and smart to be able to do that, but to consider that as an entry level, because it's not required to have that level of expertise in order to do a good job. It just seems like there's a gap.
Well, and the technology changes so quickly that who knows if a CCNA will even be sufficient or relevant in 5 years,
Right.
right?
We don't know what the future holds. I kind of look at it big picture. As we're producing more data, you're going to have to store it, you're going to have to secure it, and you're going to have to network it so that people can
Yeah,
communicate in some way. And you need a workforce that is skilled and knowledgeable in that area, but the specific skills are going to be changing constantly.
totally. Well, I mean, to that point, like just look at how long it took to get college degrees taken out of a mandatory requirement for state government jobs. You know, the point for years that the industry and everyone else was like, you don't need a college degree to be a really great technologist. And it doesn't hurt, but you should be able to count experience instead of a college degree. And I mean, that took decades to get
Right.
changed. So I'm not sure the pace in which government can do these workforce investments, strengthen the workforce, will keep up with just the ever-changing demand in the industry.
Well, I mean, when our next topic, when they in the strategic plan they address AI and the governor's plans. I just watched a press conference that he's done recently. The governor talks about it constantly and is really driving and pushing the state to adopt more. Whether that's going to and how that's going to happen is going to be fun to unfold. But the plan says that they to advance an inclusive digital experience for all to ensure equitable access to digital government services. And
well, also in the plan is continually future-proof the business of government, and by preparing for technological advancements. That one too screams AI, right?
Right.
Like, how are we going to future-proof against AI? And I'm like, I don't know if we are going to future-proof against AI. It's more like, let's embrace and future-proof our practices in how we use AI.
When you say future-proof our practices, can you unpack that a little bit? What do you have in mind there?
So I think it's just about being nimble and being open to change and being open to making change more quickly. Like, that's how you future-proof, right? Change is the only, what is it? Death, taxes, and change. I would throw change in there as the third inevitable consequence of just living in society today. And government is not great with change, certainly not with really fast change, like the type of change that's demanded by adopting AI into your practices. So I think that's what they're sort of getting at there, is like, we need to have a better process of looking at emerging technologies, adopting emerging technologies for use in government, so that we aren't caught flat-footed and a decade behind the technologies that everyone else is using.
I've sensed a real desire and awareness of the problem among the leadership in technology procurement and state. They know they have to do things differently, not just in AI, but in technology procurement in general, but definitely and particularly in AI. Can you imagine an AI project going through the normal technology procurement, and you're talking developing an idea and solution and procurement process that takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah. Well, what's terrifying about it, you're sensing some apprehension in our state's procurement leadership. And I was on a call yesterday with a national procurement official. So there's a National Association of State Procurement Officials. And they know I'm from California, and they're like, oh my gosh, we just love calling California because you guys are such leaders on AI. And especially when it comes to procurement, like, we love calling and asking what you guys are working on. And I'm like, oh gosh, this is a little scary, because like, when I look at what we're working on, we're still trying to figure it out. Like, the state is still trying to figure it out. We're doing things. We are active, far more active than everyone else, who's just like, we're going to just wait and see how this unfolds. But yeah, California is a leader in AI procurement. And I still think that puts us a little behind the curve, though, right? Like, we're using AI in everyday life in the private sector.
Well, I think in the private sector, there is definitely a figuring out process where people are installing it, trying it, failing, and I give kudos. The RFI squared process, where okay, the right approach for government is definitely to work really hard and define what problem you're trying to solve.
Yep.
Listen to a bunch of different solutions and pick one. So
I love a
parse-
good POC, and
Right.
that's like the foundation of the RFII. And yeah, proof of concepts, try it before you buy it, test things out. Those are all great ideas.
I want to bring up, and it's not a criticism. I love the process, and I'm walking clients through it. We're looking forward to participating in the next round. But what I have found from a small business and a DVBE perspective is a lot of the small business and the innovators in this space don't have a 5 years worth of experience or a massive staff to design it. And maybe you don't need that in order for a solution for a product that in a language model that didn't even exist 6 months ago.
It is a little tough. I think we're sort of seeing the big expected guys win out in some of these preliminary
Well, who can afford to
phases.
work for 6 months with a big team for $1?
No one.
And that
Except
doesn't
those
mean,
big guys, right?
which doesn't mean that there aren't good solutions in the small space. So I look forward to engaging with technology procurement leadership to carve out a space to hear from some of the smaller guys. And that's it's not a request for business, but it's a request for, if you're a small solution provider and you know that you can perform in this space, we'd love to hear from you so that we can elevate your solution and voice to maybe work out a different process to interact with the state to bring some of those smaller voices to the table, because $1 payment for 6 months worth of work for a large technology team is just not gonna work.
It is tough. Look, it's not perfect, but you're right. It is far ahead and above what other states are doing in this area. And I also don't want anyone to look at it as like, this is it. This is the way the state is using generative AI, because that's totally not the case. Like, there are plenty of generative AI products, policies, a proof of concept on its own outside of the, what is it, like 6, 7, 8 POCs, RFI squareds that we've seen out of DGS so far. So it's happening. And I think the state's done a great job of sort of saying, this is one way you can do that. But we're seeing AI adopted all over the place, which is really fabulous outside of just that traditional AI process.
So this Envision document is going to guide the state's technology process over the next 3 years. I appreciate you sharing some of that expertise on what's in it. A couple of concluding questions. One, where can our listeners find the document, and then maybe some tips on what should they do? What's an action step they should do with regard to the document?
It's all over CDT's website, landing page right there. Envision 2026 CDT on a search will land you right to it. Live it, breathe it, own it, and then raise your hand if you're reading something and you're like, I have a way to help with this. Like, my products, my services, my team can help you accomplish this goal. That's where it's on you to step it up and point it out to our leadership.
Exciting. A great way to kick off our 2025 episode of Gov Tech Today. Appreciate you.
Thanks.